Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Histories of Horror, where we follow the echoes of the past to uncover the truth behind the veil. It's Sai Marie, and tonight Al and I are leaving the haunted streets of New Orleans behind to step into my hometown of Eugene, Oregon in 1978. Now, that's a little bit before my time. Not too far before my time, about 6 years or so. So we're exploring one of the most shocking cases in Pacific Northwest history, the severed remains of Pamela Lee Bruno, found in a dumpster, and the trials that followed. Al, how does this one strike you?
So this case is chilling because it wasn't hidden in the wilderness or washed away by a river. It was placed in a shopping center dumpster, discovered by two scavengers searching for cardboard. Inside, a severed thigh, a mutilated breast, scarred with human bite marks. What began as a grotesque mystery spiraled into indictments, confessions, and a courtroom drama that gripped Eugene for years.
It certainly did.
February 24th, 1978, two scavengers rummaging for cardboard in a West Side shopping center dumpster pulled out a heavy plastic bag. At first, they thought it was spoiled meat from the grocery store, but upon closer inspection revealed something more horrifying.
The larger piece was a severed female thigh, cut from just above the knee to the waist. The smaller piece was a breast, mutilated and ravaged by human teeth marks. The smell was rancid, the sight unbearable. The men vomited, and then they called the police.
Lonikier and detectives cordoned off the area, searching nearby dumpsters for more remains, though none were found. The two pieces were sent to the medical examiner.
Dr. Ed Wilson confirmed the remains were human. Pamela Lee Bruno had been butchered. The case was now a homicide investigation.
Police suspected Pamela's husband, Johnny Charles Bruno, and their acquaintances, Charles and Lonetti Hayes. The Hayes home had become the focal point.
Crime lab supervisor Mary Ann Vaughn entered the house with an oxygen mask, searching for trace evidence. Chemicals revealed blood traces invisible to the naked eye.
Followed. Bruno, Charles Hayes, and Lonetti Hayes were charged with Pamela's murders. The press dubbed it the dumpster find.
On May 23, 1978, in County Circuit Court, the courtroom was packed, spectators turned away. Deputy District Attorney Brian Barnes opened with a recounting of the discovery, the investigation, and Bruno's taped confession.
Defense Attorney Harry Karp warned jurors that they would be looking at a charnel house. Barnes countered it was more like a slaughterhouse, an unparalleled ritualistic killing involving blood, guts, and gore.
Pamela's body was allegedly strung up over a bathtub, drained of her blood, disemboweled, and butchered. Her family fled the courtroom in tears as the details were read aloud.
Bruno's admitting biting Pamela's breast, tying her up, and stabbing her once. He claimed Charles and Lonetti Hayes inflicted most of the wounds. His voice was weak, frightened, resigned. I couldn't believe this was happening.
And keep that in mind, this was Pamela's husband. Neighbors testified to Bruno's violence, attempts to throw Pamela in front of a car, kicking her in the head, constant drunken fights. Others painted Pamela as a promiscuous, heavy-drinking woman who was mocking Bruno's attempts at religion.
Psychiatrists clashed. Dr. Barry Maletsky argued Bruno suffered from an alcoholic blackout, incapable of forming intent. Dr. Hugh Gardner countered that Bruno remembered enough to prove intent, calling him an immoral, selfish psychopath.
Pamela's grandmother testified Bruno had called her the night of the murder, hinting at a stabbing before abruptly hanging up. Housemates claimed they heard nothing, yet failed lie detector tests. The trial became a theater of horror and contradiction.
After 3 hours of deliberation, the jury found Johnny Charles Bruno guilty of felony murder, ruling Pamela's death occurred during a sexual assault. He was sentenced to life in prison.
Charles Hayes waived his right to a jury trial and was convicted by stipulated facts, sentenced to life. His conviction was later overturned, but in 1981, he was retried in Marion County, convicted again, and sentenced to life.
Lonetti Hayes remained in jail for years awaiting trial. Eventually, she was convicted of first-degree manslaughter and sentenced to 20 years with credit for time served.
By 1982, appeals were exhausted. Bruno, Charles Hayes, and Lonetti Hayes were all serving sentences in Oregon prisons. More than 4 years after Pamela's murder, the case was fully adjudicated, but the horror remained.
Prosecutor Barnes told the jury, We don't know yet whether we have the full story of what took place that night, and that uncertainty lingers.
Even with confessions, witnesses, and convictions, the full truth of what happened in the Haynes house
Pamela's
may never
case
be known.
reminds us that horror isn't always about the unknown killer. It's about betrayal within a marriage, ritualistic violence, and the collapse of trust.
Exactly. And the dumpster, the bathtub, the courtroom, they became stages of horror. And whether Pamela's death was driven by rage, ritual, or drunken chaos, the silence that followed is what endures. That said, let's take a look real quickly at some of the court documents that I found regarding this case. This one is on caselavlex.com and it is from July 30th, 1979. It is the State of Oregon Appellant Cross Respondent versus Leonetti Anita Haynes. Argued and submitted from May 31st, 1979, and July 30th, 1979 was when it was decided. The defendant was charged with murder, and then she was moved from pretrial omnibus hearing to determine the voluntariness and admissibility of statements allegedly made by the defendant to police officers and other persons after the alleged act set out in the indictment. The trial court ruled some statements admissible and others were not. The state appeals and the defendant cross appeals. There had not yet been a charge on the trial. John Bruno and Charles Haynes, the defendant's husband, were arrested on March 10th and 11th, respectively, for the murder of Pamela Bruno. After she learned of her husband's arrest, the defendant contacted Detective Davis of Eugene Police Department, a family friend, and asked that he accompany her to the Springfield Police Station where her husband was being held. Davis obliged, and the defendant spent several hours discussing Charles Haynes' arrest with Springfield police. She claimed that he could not have been involved in the homicide because she and he were together at the time that it occurred, and she returned to her home. So she was trying to cover for him already. Now let's go back a little bit. So the story is that Johnny and Pamela Bruno were a young married couple living in Eugene, Oregon in 1978. Johnny was 27, worked as a tree trimmer, and Pamela was 25 and she was a stay-at-home wife. Their relationship was rife with abuse and drug use. Their neighbors knew them to be very problematic, constantly arguing. They also supposedly shared disturbing sexual appetites that resulted in their arrest and conviction for contributing to the delinquency of minors. So these obviously weren't people without their own issues if those allegations were true. Supposedly, Pamela, who was the victim, and Johnny, her husband, who helped murder her, invited two young teens in their
So, in short, Eugene wasn't just the site of a crime. It became a monument to uncertainty, a chilling reminder that even when killers are named, the shadows remain. Until next time, stay curious.
Mhm.